Sound
Yeah.
good? Okay. All right.
Okay.
Here we go.
We're on.
Yep. Here we go. Green light. Okay. Hey, welcome back to the Pretty Well podcast. I'm Lisa Smith, and today I am so excited to be talking with Denise Karen. Denise is from Warrior Goddess Wellness. She is amazing. You're going to love our conversation today. Denise is a relationship and trauma health and wellness coach. She's also a nutritionist, and equally as important, Denise is a fellow Marine. So we share the sisterhood there. Hey, welcome, Denise. Thank you for coming. I'm so excited to talk with you.
Thank you for having me on, Lisa. And that old Marine Corps. We got almost part of a fire team here. So it's gonna
Almost.
be
That's right. That's right. We're getting it going for sure. But hey, you and I have talked, and you work with lots of women, and you help women heal from toxic relationships. Share with us, Denise, how did you get started in this space?
Well, it was 13 years into my marriage when I really started to experience major body issues. Like I had hypothyroidism, a lot of food sensitivities, some food intolerances. I had this heartburn that wouldn't go away, and I had major anxiety. And so, in true Marine fashion, I became a nutritional therapist to overcome some of my symptoms. And because I just wasn't getting any relief going to the different doctors.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, I ended up having a lot of body issues like stiff neck and shoulders, and I had frozen shoulder, and it just seemed like my body was just like shutting down. And so, of course, I was really fatigued, and I became a personal trainer trying to help myself. And, that's what us Marines do. We go take action, and I was trying to help myself.
Trying to fix the problem, right? Yeah.
And it wasn't until I finally left my 20-year marriage that I became aware of the word toxic. And I just had no idea. And, like most women, I don't think they really understand, putting the two things together, toxic relationship and relational stress, and just the impact on mind, body, spirit. And it was really only after I was out that I really understood what I had lived through and how my body had been so impacted, both my mental health and physical health. And now I'm just really passionate about educating women about toxic relationships and how they can heal in an integrative, holistic way, mind, body, spirit. So that's really what drove me to helping women in my own program now.
I love that, because so often we do look at the physical roots of what we have going on, because especially those are physical health problems you just shared. And so we look for a physical root, but what we have to realize is the emotion and the spirit, mind, body, spirit, the emotions and the spiritual aspect are all coming into play, and your body was crying out for help. So I am fascinated by that. Tell me what you found. What kind of correlation have you found between relational stress or toxic relationships and health problems? What have you seen that connection to be?
There's a lot of things that are interconnected with all of that. And, there's a lot of negative mental health outcomes. You see a lot of anxiety, depression, mood disorders, hormones are all over the place. The other thing that a lot of people don't talk about is, middle-aged women that are navigating perimenopause, and they're also navigating menopausal, symptoms. And so this makes the perfect storm for a lot of emotional upset with all of that, and just having, some dysregulation with all of that. So again, that can go back into menopause, tying back in where there might be an overarching toxic relationship functionality, which people don't see. So, there's the mood disorders, there is immune system is impacted. So they're having a lot of colds and flus and just illnesses that just crop up out of nowhere. And there's a lot of sleep disorders, insomnia, There's the rumination that's happening. There's a lot of overthinking, which is keeping people up late at night. And, again, how it presents in the body, digestive issues,
Mhm.
constipation, bloating, food intolerances, like can't handle caffeine. So there's all of that. And then there's coping. How do you cope with something like that? Women tend to go into the emotional eating realm, or
Mhm.
they undereat. They're not eating to sustain themselves, or they got into alcohol or other substance abuses to cope. So it creates this like perfect storm that you really, you got to start peeling back all of the layers to figure out what's going on. And it may not just be a health outcome, that it'll be a toxic relationship. And that's when I talk to women and help women, sometimes it wasn't even, there was stress going on in the marriage or the relationship,
Mhm.
but there wasn't this, oh, they didn't know what toxic was.
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
unfortunate.
Yeah, yeah, and that's helpful to see because I hear what you're saying. You're seeing all kinds of aspects in your practice where people they may have emotional imbalances, they have gut issues, they have adrenal fatigue, just all these different things, and that can be very confusing. And you're helping them get to the roots of that. I was intrigued when you mentioned gut issues. What link do you see between IBS and leaky gut and gut issues with being in relational stress?
Well, I mean, emotional distress really creates that fight or flight
Mhm.
stress response. So you've got more cortisol going in there. The
Mhm.
nervous system is dysregulated. And
Mhm.
with all of that, it just creates this perfect storm for the digestive system. So, thinking about, our digestive system really starts, in our mouth and all the way through elimination. And there can be increased incidence of cold sores. There could be mouth ulcers that are going on. There could be swallowing problems. There could be bloating, and then nausea, constipation, just stomach cramps, stomach pain, heartburn. I mean, you name it. I mean, the whole digestive tract just seems to be really, with the stress and just keeping that tension in your body. There's no other way for it to go, so it goes to other systems, like IBS and digestive.
Yeah, and that goes hand in hand, Denise, with the gut being the second brain, and how the gut brain connection and the vagus nerve, which runs, from the brain down through the body and hits all the organs. And I've just been doing a lot of studying on the vagus nerve, and it is a control to switch us out of fight or flight and into the parasympathetic, into the rest and digest. But if you've got that constant stress and that constant cortisol overproduction, I can definitely see what you're seeing in your clients, and we think about something like GERD, we think about acid reflux as being a stress related condition. So it only makes sense that all the other things would be impacted by that stress and that cortisol elevation too.
And Lisa, on all of that, you go to a traditional doctor, not a naturopath, and they're throwing, all different sorts of medication to treat the symptoms. And,
Yeah.
when really you go back to the fight or flight and the parasympathetic nervous system, and, how many of us really understand the vagus nerve, how to do vagus resets, how to calm the nervous system, that's not really taught anywhere. I mean, it's like this specialized, and really it's the heart of healing is the nervous system, peeling all that back. And I work with women, in body movements and breathing techniques to be able to reset the nervous system. And when you've been in this hyper alert space of dealing with toxic relationship,
Mm.
women are just so amped up that it just takes time and concerted effort to be able to work through all those layers in which their body was activated.
Yeah, yeah, that makes total sense. And something that's coming to mind is even even if someone is in relational stress, and say it's not even that their spouse is or partner may be toxic, but together their communication isn't healthy. So together they need to learn new skills of communication and how to bring that relational stress down and how to be open and figure that all out. That's I see it as, so what you're doing is so important, and it's so multifaceted. You're talking about peeling the onion, but there's so many pieces. We're looking at healing, we're looking at resetting the nervous system, we're looking at, you know, coming alongside and helping with new communication styles. There's a lot there for sure. But
I would love to like just share one more thing. I mean,
yeah,
there's also confidence issues, I mean, and it takes two to make a dance, I mean, yes,
right,
there is personality, but
right.
then there can be grooming and the way that that person's communication style has been, kind of impeded, of how they've gone along, or maybe they were a people pleaser, and they really were trying to work in the best way possible and they became a people pleaser. So, for every toxic person, there are other extenuating life skills and communication skills, codependency, people pleasing, that all kind of winds together in this like just this crazy making push pull stop start type of relationship, and it all has to be wound back in mind body spirit, life skills, self-support, communication, assertiveness, boundaries. I mean, it's kind of like the relationship, but there's also the body too, so those two things go together, and that's hard to like pull them apart.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it takes oh my gosh. I'm so glad you're doing this because it takes someone who knows how to help guide people, but it also takes a lot of work for sure. For sure. But tell me, let's go back. What are some of the warning signs that you see that relational stress is causing gut problems or health problems? What are the things you start to see as warning signs?
I mean, the big one is just the panic. Like there's a lot of anxiety that's happening, that's kind of like this underlying, it can be under a person's like personality.
Mm,
And just
mm,
starting to be amped up. They're not really sure how to, regulate emotionally, and things just aren't getting resolved. So they're just in panic and
mm,
they want to resolve these things, but they're not. So I see that. I also see like cold sores, more colds, they're fatigued. They sometimes get diagnosed with like fibromyalgia or, rheumatoid arthritis, autoimmune diseases.
mhm,
They're having digestive, like major digestive issues. So,
mhm,
like all over the place, with the cramping, the pain, constipation, just, gurgling that's going on.
mm,
And, the other pieces is there's just this um, low self-esteem
mm,
that is happening, like they're not sure, they're like going to everybody to try to figure this out. They might have a lot of medical appointments, they're going to therapy, they're like trying to do all this stuff. They might have some depression as well, because anxiety that can go hand in hand with depression, so there's like a coming and going.
yeah.
And, again, loss of appetite, emotional eating, neglecting self-care practices,
Mhm.
just, it's when things just start, it just kind of, there's layers of all of these things that kind of compound over time.
Yeah, and I'm glad you added the last piece on, because as a practitioner, I see a lot of the earlier symptoms, and those could be a multitude of things. They could be true food allergies, they could be leaky gut, they could be living in mold, they could be Lyme disease. But when you added in some of the personality pieces, such as really low self-esteem, doesn't trust self to find answers, is looking for other people's advice, then I think that starts to add another layer on where um, personality and relationship may be combined. Because I like you, I see people who come in and they're not well, they're sick, and they've tried everything they know of. And I do see people with a lot of those symptoms, but they'll say something like, my spouse is extremely supportive. Like, I'm so thankful. So when you add, but then they are more confident too. I can tell you, they're beaten down because they don't feel well, but they're confident that they have support. So I think that is a differentiating factor that you pulled out there. That
Yeah,
is,
and I see that in the gym. Like, I mean, women would come in wanting to lose weight, and we'd start on, how's your self-care? How is your support system?
mm,
And, within 2 or 3 training sessions, we would be getting into, the toxicity part of that, that there was codependency, there was, low confidence, there was a self-esteem issue, they weren't setting boundaries. So that's really how I ended up getting involved in this line of work too, was there was health and wellness, which I love, but then I was seeing this underlying, learned helplessness. They couldn't make decisions. They were in this toxic thing and they didn't know how to move forward in healing. And the longer that a person is in a toxic relationship, the more health problems that the person's going to see as well. So they're coming in trying to lose weight, but then they had hypothyroidism, they have autoimmune, they have all these other things there. And then you just start to wonder, like, wow, what's going on here? It's not just physical.
yeah, yeah. So what are some of the most effective techniques you found for managing this kind of stress, or even beyond that, for starting to come at this from a holistic standpoint to start to heal?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I'm kind of incredulous about is the things that help with healing are so basic. It's basic self-care.
Mhm,
And for some reason, like this, there's this dynamic, like toxic relationships are complex and
mhm,
there's so many layers to it. And the only way to really dial back the layers and heal the layers is basic self-care. And I think I'm wondering if there's like this connection between, well, I was in this really hard toxic relationship, so healing has to be hard. And
mm,
the
mhm,
simplicity of self-care is so important, but yet so many women, it's lost on them. Healthy eating,
mhm.
drinking water, going for a walk, taking self time for yourself, doing some deep breathing exercises. It's all so simple, but yet it's out of reach for someone who has children, or they're focusing on trying to keep the family together, that they always give so much of themselves that it's like a concept that is hard for them to understand, that in order to cope with stress, I need to take care of myself. In order to set boundaries, I need to take care of myself. In order to do something different, I have to do something for myself. And
Mhm.
so it's really been a struggle sometimes to work with women, to like put them on a path of like just simple. It doesn't have to be go to yoga or go to breath work for 5 hours a day. It's like taking that special time for yourself, like that half hour or whatever you can carve out, to just set up a self-care plan to give you that time to let your mind, body, spirit rest.
Yeah, yeah. So what I hear you saying is the most effective piece can be the hardest piece, and that is the mindset piece. It's a mindset shift of, oh, it is hard for us. We, as women in general, now not all women are like this, but in general, we do tend to put other people's needs first, as it's just how we are. And we're nurturers, and we feel good when we're helping, and we feel good when we're nurturing. So to be able to teach that, it's so overused, but it's so right, that it's the oxygen theory in the airplane. You got to first make sure you're okay, because you can't actually give from a place of deficit. Not well, not well. So
And
yeah.
you're so right, Lisa, on the mindset issue. Like, I guess so many women come in and they're like, well, me taking care of myself is selfish, me being selfish.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it is such a mindset shift that, no, it's like the steward or the flight attendant on the airplane. You got to take care of yourself first.
Exactly.
And it's a
Yeah.
whole mindset shift with working with women to do that. And
Yeah.
it's not just pedicures and manicures. We're talking like just basic, like taking your medication every day.
Right. Exactly. Taking time for yourself, doing some deep breathing,
Yeah.
just being quiet and not having all those thoughts bombard you all the time. I do think that when we get that mind shift made, then everything else changes. It's a game changer. And I do, when I turn it around and say, actually, it's selfish if you don't take care of yourself because you can't give from the prosperity of what you would have to give if you don't take care of yourself.
Well, and the other thing is like almost everything is self-care,
Yeah.
brushing your teeth,
Yeah.
drinking water, setting a boundary, saying no, going to bed when you say you're going to go to bed, turning off electronics when you say, having that contract with yourself. It is all self-care.
Yes. Yes. And you and I have been part of a class together, which I'm so thankful for because that's how we met. But in that class, what the leader has said is when you choose not to do one of these things that you know is the right thing for you, you're choosing to say, I choose this instead of that. So I choose being worn out, frazzled, unbalanced. I'm choosing that over going to bed on time. That's my decision. Or
Yeah.
I'm choosing to have low blood sugar and feel shaky and horrible and a headache over getting protein at breakfast. I'm choosing that. And so when we put it in that perspective, that is so powerful to really think about that it is a choice and I'm choosing that. And then all of a sudden it helps us to say, wait a minute, I've been getting this wrong. I need to start on a new path. Yeah.
Yeah. And on top of that, which is a really great point, is that every time we don't choose ourselves, it takes a little chink out of our self-confidence. So the
Yeah.
more that we're choosing ourselves, we're
Yes.
choosing to support ourselves, and that boosts our self-confidence.
Yeah.
And that's another whole layer, on top of what we've already been talking about, that just has been poof, mind blowing. I struggle with self-confidence from time to time, and I look back on my self-care plan and I'm like, oh yeah, I haven't been taking care of myself. I've been staying up and laying in my bed, scrolling social media,
Yeah.
and and 2 hours later, I should have been going to bed, and here I am. I'm stuck on YouTube, watching shorts. So we all do it.
Exactly. Exactly. And you just brought up something to me that I'll share. Um, it's a little vulnerable, but I was many years ago before I was married. My husband, this is not related to my husband at all because he's wonderful. But I was in a 4-year toxic relationship. And when you said it takes a chink out of you, it actually starts to change your self-concept. And you start to believe the things that aren't true about you. And you start to prioritize it becomes a vicious cycle. You prioritize yourself less, which makes you more tired and more unhealthy, which causes you to feel worse about yourself, which means you prioritize yourself less, and it keeps going. So I do understand that. And when you're able to take a step back and say, wait a minute, I'm going to prioritize myself more, you start to shift that circle backward and you start to make different decisions. So I get what you're saying for sure. Yeah. So tell me one of your favorite success stories in one of your clients' lives.
Well, I just love working with women to have that mindset shift about shifting from selfish, that this was taking self-care was selfish,
Mhm.
and having them flip the whole diagram on that.
Mhm.
And I worked with a woman, her name was Nancy, and she was in a 35-year toxic relationship.
Mhm.
And just like myself, she didn't know what she was living with. It was just kind of one of those crazy making type of things. And we met in the gym, and within 6 weeks she started telling me her story, and she started to take care of herself. She ended up in therapy, for a little bit, but really started to get into learn about codependency,
Mhm.
and how some of her life skills, how to turn that stuff around, where she was more confident and really speaking up for herself. And with this 35-year marriage, it came to an end. Like, she was able to choose herself. And sometimes in these long-term marriages, the only solution is to leave. And she got that, she got to that point in herself to be able to leave. And, again, each woman, is really has to really go inward to make that decision. And some women, aren't able to make that decision, but she did. She was able to choose herself. And it was so lovely to just see her growth. And she lost a bunch of weight and she like was smiling again and got some new clothes and she just like remade herself. And I checked back in with her about a couple years ago, and she had spent 2 years dating sabbatical, just was doing her own thing with her, figuring out life. And then poof, she met a new guy, and they got married a couple years ago, and she's in a loving relationship. And that's like 35 years to having a loving relationship. Like it doesn't get any better than that. And she's able to set boundaries. She takes care of herself. She goes to the gym 3 times a week. She's on her healthy eating plan. And it's just so wonderful to see my clients out in town, but they've got a new spark in their life and they're more confident. One of the biggest things that I see with women is there's an inability to make eye contact. And I think that really comes with like lack of self-esteem, like they're always looking down. And I just love seeing women that are in their power who, are back to having confidence and, just reclaim sense of life and their power. And they're holding their head up higher and they're looking you in the eye and they're like radiance is there. So that's why I do what I do, is to take a woman from chains, uncertain, learned helplessness, like depressed, anxious, and work with them on this journey to get them to radiance and joyfulness and connection and rediscovering life. That's really what I'm all about, is helping those individuals on that journey.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. I bet you that is so rewarding to see her so joyful and healthy. Yeah. So
They didn't
tell
know it was possible, they didn't know that it was possible.
that her life could be so much different. Yeah. So share with us something you wish you knew 15 years ago, or something you want others to know.
Well, I 15 years ago, that would have been right in the middle of kind of my discernment in my long-term marriage. And I wish that I understood the characteristics of toxic. And, a lot of those type of characteristics in a marriage, the coercive controlling, the rumination, the overthinking of things, and, not having the confidence, not setting boundaries, not communicating, all of those just really impact a person. And I wished I had known about that. Instead, the therapists that I had been seeing, they didn't even say the words codependency. They didn't say the words toxic. They didn't say the words narcissistic abuse. But yet all of that stuff was going on in my marriage. So, I'm thinking I've got all these major health issues when I didn't even know about relational stress and the correlation between toxic relationships. And, what we've all been talking about, what we've been talking about this whole last session is toxic relationships, stress, the relational stress component, and health, how all that's impacted, and self-esteem. That whole like thing, I wished I knew that like 15 years ago. And that's why I do what I do, is to educate women on that, because they're going to therapy, they're going to doctors, they're trying to figure this out. But through that toxic relationship lens of codependency, self-support, confidence, learned helplessness, there's a lot that's going on there. And even attachment theory, like, oh, you're an anxious attacher. Well, I may be in relationship with an avoidant person, which, there's all those different attachment things. But when you really look at it, there's that crazy making and that push, pull, stop, start piece that just the two people just can't work through it in a healthy, secure way. And, there has to be two parties to come together for all of that. So I
Mhm.
wish I knew all that.
That's a lot. Yeah, that's really helpful just to be able to put the pieces together and to realize that there was so much more to that picture than you knew. And had you known those pieces, you would have been more empowered at that point to understand what was happening
Yeah.
better. Yeah.
And I think the other missing component is
Mhm.
that, sometimes with toxic personalities, there's an inability for them to make sustainable long-term changes. And I think, women as a whole were like, oh, we'll kind of work through this and we can grow together and learn some skills, when really that's not the case with all people. And so, that's another whole thing that I wished I knew.
So what are some examples of toxic character traits?
Well, there's like coercive control.
Mhm.
There is, where, they're not getting their way.
Mhm.
And, you're just trying to stay in who you are, but there's just no going around that person. So, could be how do you dress? Like,
Mhm.
what do you wear? Who you're communicating with? What
Mhm.
time are you going to be home?
Mhm.
What they want to eat, and there could even be, another whole layer that we haven't even talked about is, pornography, or, sexless marriages, like whatever is going on can be another whole component that a lot of people don't want to talk about,
Yeah.
these kind of things. So poor communication, there's just even a focus on the other person, like coming together. There
Mhm.
can be like passive aggressiveness,
Mhm.
and just communication, and there could be a grandiosity about, and superiority excuse me, that happens in these type of relationships. So it's pretty convoluted and very complicated. Like,
Yeah.
if you have some more to share from your relationship, your experience.
Yeah. Well, I hear a lot of what you're saying. Other than the passive aggressive, they all kind of align with that narcissistic abuser. And that's a pretty difficult place to be for sure in a relationship with someone like that, because you're right, then the control, like it's so controlling, and you as a person are irrelevant. It's all about what does the narcissist want, and really your wants are irrelevant. But yeah, it was a lot of that, to be honest. Yeah. And that's a hard place to be, because it is crazy making and you start to second guess yourself. I remember I went to a therapist and I was like, what's wrong with me? Like, I think something's wrong with me. I don't understand why this is this way. And my therapist actually said, there's nothing wrong with you. You're in the wrong relationship. Thankfully, I didn't marry that person, but
Well,
mhm.
and there's, high conflict antagonism. And I'm gonna say this, and this is from my experience, my own personal experience. I actually was in trauma therapy.
Mhm.
The ex actually wrote a thank you note to the new trauma therapist whom he had never met, and said, thank you for helping us. Like, basically, that I was really messed up and
Oh,
I needed to be in trauma therapy,
oh my
and I was the root of everything. And I remember when that therapist gave me this note, like in one of our sessions, it like really had me undone. Like, oh
Mhm.
my God, wow. And she's like, well, what do you make of this? And I just was dumbfounded that my the ex, would actually write a thank you note to the trauma therapist. Thank you for helping us.
Yeah,
And I found out that he had done the same thing to the wife before me. So it was
it's
really interesting, to
it's
come up
so
with.
manipulative. Mhm. Yeah,
Absolutely.
and he was clearly trying to save face, so if he could publicly make it your fault, then he looks better. Yeah. Those are really hard situations. Um, but so now that you know what you know, and now that you've done so much work in self-care and healing, holistically, what is one of your favorite things that you do for yourself each day that's a good self-care practice? Or yeah, I guess it would be a self-care practice.
Yeah, well, first thing in the morning, I have 2 hours to my time. like that is like self-care time for me where I do some mindset work. I do fear journaling. I'm doing an emotional dump. I read my codependency meditations with all of that. I do some centering breathing. I read my Bible. And, every so often I set up some time for meditation. And I've been playing around with some new like brainwave, like different meditations with like theta and delta waves
Yeah.
and really tell a difference. So, I take it, that's kind of like self-care playtime. And it's not something that I ever try to deviate from because that's when I'm at my best. And I want to make sure I take care of me for all of that, you
That's
know?
awesome. So let's unpack it a little bit so people know I know what you're talking about and the emotional dump because we've done this together in our class. But just unpack that a little bit. What is the emotional dump and what is the purpose of it?
Well, I think that being in a toxic relationship, when I left, I was just so emotionally shut down.
Mhm,
And so I really wasn't embracing my emotions. So
mhm,
doing that emotional dump every day just brings up whatever I'm harboring that day. And,
mhm,
we're emotional beings. So we navigate life. That's kind of our protective circle around us
mhm.
about, the emotions, like how we navigate life. And, I've actually switched it up in this class to doing a video emotional dump. Like I actually look
Cool.
at myself doing the video. And
Yeah.
that's been so connecting, like for me as a person to connect with myself. And it really, sometimes I have to do emotional dumping 2 or 3 times if I'm navigating a really stressful day. But
Mm,
it really just helps me, okay, I'm feeling anger, or I'm feeling joy and confidence, or I'm anxious or scared, or, whatever else. And we can have those little pieces where I am feeling confident, but I'm frustrated and I'm a little bit anxious. So there can be
mm.
like all different types of emotions that are coming up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And what I love about it, Denise, is that regardless, so for our listeners, if someone's been in a toxic relationship or even not, the beauty of the emotional dump is we all have heard about doing a gratitude practice, right? But sometimes that gratitude feels real, but like icing on a cake. Like we're just skimming it on top of our day. But if we do the emotional dump first, because we all have all those emotions you talked about, we all have anxiety, we all have fear and nervousness and disappointment and frustration and anger and all of them, we have all of them. But if we don't get them out, then when we try to slap gratitude on, it feels like, yeah, I'm thankful for this, but you have no idea what kind of a day I had. But if you can purge that stuff and then you put the gratitude in, it goes deep and you're like, oh yes, there are all these things and I'm dumping them out, whether on video or whether I write them or whether I talk them into my phone. I get them out, and once I get them out, I've cleaned the vessel, so when I put in the gratitude, it sticks better. It's not just like a skim coat.
Yeah, and it's for me, it's kind of like icing on the cake. And I think sometimes, women in healing from these types of things, that emotions are like, oh, we don't want to feel them because they are so deep and
Yeah.
they're sad, with all of that. So kind of having that gratitude practice is like the icing on the cake. And it's like, okay, to eat a cake that has all these different emotions. And I
Mm.
can have those two things together, on a day-to-day basis. And it's okay to feel my emotions, and it's okay to feel gratitude after I do that emotional dump. So it kind of puts them to it puts the layers them together,
Mm.
which is
That
beautiful.
way. Yes, I like that way of looking at it too. I've even shared that with my daughter who's 19. When you're going through your day, at the end of the day, get out the stuff that's stressing you out. Like when you're in college, lots of things are coming at you that can be stressful. Get them out and then put the gratitude in, and you'll see how much more powerful it is. And she's even said she likes it. So yeah, I just love that practice. So I love that. And then you have you read the Bible for sure, and you read your codependency journal and all of those things. They're all such good practices that then they start to ground you into your day. And I'm sure you feel much more. And I do too. When I do those, the days that I don't make time for those things, don't feel as grounded as the days when I just take the time, even if it's quick, and do those things. Mm-hmm.
I love, Lisa, that you're doing all that and you're teaching your daughter.
Oh,
Like, what would that have looked like for either one of us if we had had that knowledge and education of the importance of doing self-care and how to do it?
yeah.
I would have been a lot different, in my lifetime. But, I'm glad that you're able to have that connection with your daughter to teach her that wonderful skill. And,
I
that's
like
awesome.
that. Thank you. Thanks for saying that. Because, yeah, I do, anything we can do to shortcut our kids' success, and they don't have to walk as windy of a road to find the answers is awesome for sure. Well, I have absolutely loved this. Tell me, how can people find you? What do you offer to your clients? So how can people work with you? And then how do they find you?
Yeah, so thank you, Lisa, for that. And thank you for having me on today.
Sure thing.
A YouTube channel called Be a Warrior Goddess.
Okay.
And that's kind of a mental health meets health and wellness channel where I talk about narcissistic abuse, toxic relationships, and trauma, health, and wellness. That's what I call it. So
Mhm.
that's just kind of a new flavor on how to handle coming out of one of these relationships, just having self-care practice, mindset, different things. So I started that like 4 months ago, and I don't know, I've got like 70 plus videos out there right now. I'm putting a toe in the water with some shorts and just having some fun out there. I did a cooking little version, a Toxie about a week ago, and that was kind of fun. So I'm having fun out there on YouTube because Be a Warrior Goddess.
Okay.
And my website is beawarriorgoddess.com. And my program is a 8-week transformational program that will help a woman boost her confidence, to help with self-care, address anxiety, depression, rumination, look at some nutritional supplements, some other breathing techniques of how she can get back into body and to embrace her emotions. So I work with different clients on all of that. And all of that is out on my webpage, beawarriorgoddess.com.
Awesome. I will put the link in the show notes so that people can find you also.
Absolutely. And I'm so blessed that we met in that class. And of course, our connection being Marines. How many female Marines do you meet in a class?
Exactly. When we made that connection, I was very excited because that doesn't happen very often, especially across the country. You're on the West Coast and I'm in Pennsylvania. So
But I immediately knew the type of person that you were because of serving your country and what we've been through. It's not easy being a female Marine, and knowing that we're out helping people just really, I think for me, kind of is like an amazing part of our journey. For where we've come.
absolutely. Absolutely. So I will have to end it by saying Semper Fi.
Semper Fi.
That's right. That's right. And thank you so much. And we are going to chat again. So we'll be back together on a
Great.
future episode, but thank you. And we'll have the link in the show notes. And until next time, stay pretty well. Bye.